Well, hello again, and welcome back to our daily devotional. Now, today I'd like to give you a bit of a challenge. And this might seem a strange one, but since we've got a bit more time than we would normally have to think things through, I want to pose a question to you. Don't be insulted when you hear this, but the question is, are you worshipping any idols? Now, that might seem an absolutely crass and stupid thing for me to be saying. You think, idols? We don't do idols in this country. But I wonder if actually we do. I remember thinking years and years ago about the Ten Commandments. I learned them in Sunday school. We'd read in Exodus chapter 20, this list of commandments from God. Then when I went through Bible college, we went and looked at them again. And I remember about that time thinking to myself, it's interesting. If you look at a lot of the commandments that are there in Exodus 20, they sort of make sense today, don't they? Love our neighbours as ourselves. Honour the Sabbath to keep it holy, and all those things. You think, yep, that's relevant. But when you start thinking about verses 3 to 5, it almost seems like God was forgetting that these commandments were going to last for thousands of years. So let me read you chapter 20, verses 3 to 5. You'll see what I mean. So starting at verse 3, it says, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." Now, why would God make such a big deal of that if that was only going to be relevant for a relatively short period of time? We know that in ancient times, many people were worshipping mythical creatures, animals, the sky, the stars, the sun, the moon, mountains, trees. But we don't do any of those things now, do we? Right? But then could it be that God was speaking across time and that actually there are idols in our world? We just don't see them as that. I can tell you when this became very real to me, and that was about 25 years ago. I had two Volkswagen Beetle cars. They were my favourite car. My grandfather had one, and I always said my first car will be a Volkswagen Beetle, and it was a bright orange one. Then I had a white one that I did quite a bit of work on, but the one I always wanted was a convertible, and friends of mine had one, and I said to them, if you ever sell, I want first refusal. So he rang me one day and said, we're selling our car. Do you want to buy it? And I said, yep, absolutely I do. And I'll put a picture up so you can see it. That's in its finished state. It didn't look like that when I bought it. So it was supposed to be a 6-month project, and I was going to spend some money and a bit of time just doing it up and having some fun in it. Well, it turned into a 6-year mammoth body-off restoration. I put thousands of pounds, thousands of man-hours into it. And I loved doing it. I liked the practical aspects. I liked the way it was becoming beautiful. I liked the idea that I was restoring something that was really rusty and heading for the breaker's yard, and I was rescuing it. So it had many layers of pleasure in it for me. But I can clearly remember one evening I was in the car park outside the offices of where I worked, sandblasting panels from this car that I was hoping to restore. And the Lord very clearly said to me, "You do realize that's an idol, don't you?" And I was thinking, what do you mean? That can't be God. Of course it's not an idol. But then in that moment, I realized, most of my time, most of my focus, most of my energy, most of my money goes on this. And if that's not a definition of worship, I don't know what is. So I was putting more focus, more importance on it than I was on the Lord. But I was in a job where I couldn't afford not to have a really close relationship with him. And it was getting in the way of that relationship. Not just because of the time, but because my heart and my mind were much more fixated on this car than they were on the Lord. So I wheeled it back into the garage and I didn't touch it for a year. I knew it would be wrong if I did. And then about a year later, I just felt, I know what, I've got peace. And I carried on and I finished it, and I never felt that it was in the way of me and God before. But it was an idol. I didn't do it deliberately. It wasn't my intention. It just ended up being one. And in our modern world, there are idols. We just don't call them that. And everybody on the planet is worshipping something. Even the most dyed-in-the-wool atheist you'll ever meet is worshipping something. They just won't call it worship. But we can worship football teams, shopping, media stars, our favourite pop singer, our favourite hobby. Our house, our kids, our career, they can all be idols. It's not that any of them are inherently evil, it's the time and devotion that we invest in them that makes them idols, and that's what will trigger the jealous God who wants to be the sole focus of our devotion. So although it sounds like a crazy question, I just wonder if it isn't worth, while we've got the time, having a quick look across our life and say, is anything in my world at the moment potentially an idol? Is it diverting my focus, my time, my attention, my passion, my energy, my money, my motivation away from the Lord and his kingdom? Because if it is, it's probably an idol and I need to tear it down. And God will help us do that. He's not in the blame game. He's not in the condemnation game, but he is in the business of wanting to be the sole focus of our undivided attention.